All right, in this video, we're going to do an X space titled Blockchain Transcendence, linking Bitcoin SV to the Akashic Records. Woo woo to the freaking max right here. So we're going to bring on some of the influential minds and speakers in the space that see into the future. I call them visionaries, people that can see past, or people with insight, people that see where we're going and how this trend is taking place. These minds are so unique and so unusual right now that this video is going to go down in history and look back on as one of those that was like, hey, wow, those guys really got it. They really made those connections all those years ago, way ahead of time. How did they know that stuff? How did they know that stuff was going to be relevant? So this is going to be one of those spaces. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll go ahead and start up an X space. My name is Gavin. All right. I'm going to be hosting it, and we're going to get started here in just a moment. All right. On the record, everybody, we got the space going now. This is Gavin Mehl. We've got the X space going. X Town Hall. This is the blockchain transaction linking Bitcoin SV to the Akashic Records. And let me just give a little background on how this was inspired. And there's a thread that was going on X that was inspired by Crypto Spartacus. He started it, and then people started chiming in about this idea that was put forward in the movie. Oh gosh, man, the Matthew McConaughey movie. Help me out, somebody. The Matthew McConaughey movie. Crypto Spartacus commented about. He came up with it. Anyways, there's this movie with Matthew McConaughey where he goes and the theory is like he's goes out into outer space, and he's basically like a rocket scientist, and he's taken off of his duty as a rocket scientist, and then he goes back. He's just a regular guy on a farm, and then his little girl is inspired to get into NASA as well. So what happens is that he goes, and they're hunting some sort of drones, and once one of the drones they find, they end up leading them into a hidden base, like a military base, and it turns out to be NASA. And so in that, they're like, hey, we want you to pilot this space operation to go out to outer space into this black hole. And so he's like, all right, he takes the job, and he goes out into outer space, and then there's a black hole, and apparently it can go out and change time. So it forwards you ahead way in time, and where like people on Earth are aging 100 years, and you age barely only a few hours. So he goes out there and solves the world's problems, but in the meantime, he's trying to get back to his time, and he goes in, and there's a clip in the movie that shows him in this library, and inside the library is he's like this. It's like this blurred image, and it's him. His little girl is on the other side of the library, and she has like a little watch in her hand, and he's saying, he's begging his little girl. He's like, don't let me leave. And he comes back into the room, and he's seeing himself in the past. When he leaves, he decides he's going to go on this mission, and he's like, don't let me leave. Don't let me go on this mission. If I go, he's trying to communicate to her through the other world. This is like this spiritual side of it, right? So he's saying, don't let me go. And then she goes over there, and the books fall on the ground. And then she goes back, and then she's all of a sudden older. She's a mature, and now she's working for NASA as well. And she's now kind of picking up the vibes from him that he's throwing down from this other side, this other realm of the Akashic Records side. And the books fall back on the ground, and somehow she sees the watch, and the watch is basically, he starts to do Morse code on the watch, and she gets it. She's like, wow. And she knows Morse code, and she writes the Morse code down right there on the watch. And all of a sudden it's like, it opens up into solving the problems that they're trying to solve with NASA at that time. But the point is that it's this Akashic Records, my first exposure really to learning about this Akashic Records thing. So I mean, that's going to give a little background on it. I really don't know much about it other than apparently it's a higher dimension. And the theory, the reason that I was interested in starting a space like this after I saw this thread was because, see, the way I could describe it is the Akashic Records is logging events. Now it logs like future and past events, and while the future may not be 100% set, it has like different timelines. This is the theory that you could go this way and this could happen. If you turn this way, this could happen. And so it has these different, choices that we make, and we can go different directions, but they're all logged out, and all these events and all these thoughts from everyone in history that are on earth right now and in the future ever born or will be born are all connected through this consciousness. So like we're all one, we're all connected, but this is the science behind how everybody's connected. And so the reason I was relevant to Bitcoin SV, the way I'm seeing it, is because, well, we got this blockchain with infinite scaling that everything's logged through a SAT, and every single SAT will, can be every single thought, every single record, right? Thought, record, consciousness could be tied back in to the blockchain, and we could actually then have an understanding of our true history. Because right now, what's our problem that we're facing is we don't know what time it is. We think it's 2024, July 24th. That's what we're told. Okay, well, we're told that, but we don't. Is that what timeline? Is that really what's going on? We can't really confirm that. We don't know for sure. We don't know exactly, well, what happened 200 years ago? Well, we were told about this book and in our school, but is that really what happened? Do we have proof do we have, because there's so much, information that says that's not what happened. Something else happened. So, this actually could potentially give us records of our history and connecting people into their true past and their true heritage by connecting the Akashic Records and Bitcoin SV. That's my introduction. I should have said a timeline. That took a little longer than I wanted, but, Crypto Spartacus, you want to open up? Casey, let's open this up a little bit and see what Matt, you're on stage, BSV Panama, hands up.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good introduction. My take on the whole issue is that there are things that we're pretty much not allowed to access, like the Akashic Records. I personally, I feel like I experienced something similar to what's depicted in the Matthew McConaughey scene where he's in the library. On an instance where I vaped DMT, and really I think it's quite concerning that these substances aren't widely discussed or used when we have this like historical record of people using them for thousands of years. It's very odd that it's not a topic of wider discussion in society, and really I think the reason for that is the same reason we don't talk about how monetary policy is used to enslave us. I think that one of the biggest things that's wrong in the world is that we don't have access to these other layers of consciousness, and that people within positions of authority in government have pretty much restricted our access to these substances so that they can control us more easily and to make us more slave-like and obedient. I really truly think that if the average person understood what is being kept away from them, they wouldn't go along with the way the world works. And that in the same way we're oppressed financially through our monetary systems and central banking, we're oppressed actually much more so through the control of our consciousness, where we're not allowed to access these other realms that exist. I don't know if you want to call it a realm or the collective unconsciousness. It's unclear to me whether or not that's what you're tapping into, but you're tapping into this other coherent reality. And the people who have the ability to tap into that reality have certain advantages over those of us who don't get access to that. It's the most fascinating thing in the world, and for some reason we're not allowed to talk about it. Or, I mean, you can talk about it, but it's so widely unknown to people that it's like, people just talk about you, think of you as if you're crazy when you talk about these sort of experiences, because it's so foreign to people that just hearing about it sounds nuts. But it should be like a fundamental human experience that pretty much we should all have the ability to access. It's just the way either our minds work or reality works. Accessing that type of thing shouldn't be prohibited to anyone. So I mean, my take on how the world is being run right now is that people who are very wealthy and powerful have learned about these things. They learned about these things a long time ago, and they've been keeping it to themselves, keeping this information away from the rest of us so that they can use the leverage that they have through our ignorance to control us. And really, I think that if everyone understood that there's this other realm that you could tap into, whether it be in your own mind or through our collective consciousness, that we all have this access to this other dimension, that being kept away from people is a bigger problem to me in the world than that we're all slaves to central bankers. Because it's an empowering experience to find out that there's this other place that exists. And anyone who's seen this other place, like, you know right away, there's kind of like an information download where like it tells you certain things when you go there as well. And again, that sounds crazy if you've never experienced it, but to anyone who has experienced it, it's just a crime against humanity that we don't share this information with everybody. So I mean, that's kind of my take on it.
Mila and BSV Panama has her hand up. So why don't we start with you, Mila? All right, we'll come back to you. Let's go over to BSV Panama. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, good. Thank you. Thank you. I really like the reference you made to Interstellar, the movie.
Interstellar.
Which is, yeah, it's a very, very inspiring movie. I must have seen it at least 6 times, at least. And the meta message, let's say, of this movie has to do with what transcends time and space, because the guy finds himself in a tesseract, in a 5th dimension, and basically it finds out that love is what transcends time and space, because what connects everything. So in my reading of that movie, I didn't really see any relationship with what is called Akashic Records, but I saw the message of the what is the possible representation of the 5th dimension, which unites reality with the origin of it in a timeless space-time, because it's outside of space-time. But at the same time, having said that, I would like to be a little bit precise about Akashic Records, because
Please.
I like to talk. I
Do
like to
you
know
have an
what
understanding of Akashic Records?
No, I like to be precise about words.
Please.
So, for context, if we examine the etymology of the Sanskrit term akasha, it is derived from kas, which means to shine. So it acquired the connotation of open space or vacuity in Vedic Sanskrit later on. And then it was used to express the concept of sky or atmosphere in classical Sanskrit. And in Vedantic Hinduism, it is described as the basis and essence of all things in the material world, or as the first element created, because you know that in the ancient times they thought that all reality was created from basic elements, and akasha was considered to be preceding air, fire, water, earth. So and what was it? It was called sound. Basically, it was the element that informed everything else. Let's say the preceding element to the material elements was considered to be the vibration that informs form, gives form to form, right? Which is sound. So it's interesting to see that, because then in Buddhist phenomenology, akasha was divided into limited space, endless space, for reasons related to conventional knowledge and absolute knowledge. So this not really necessary to go into. But the modern idea of Akashic records, it actually comes from beliefs of occultists like Blavatsky. You know Elena Blavatsky from Theosophy, and from Leadbeater, which was a co-founder of Theosophy with her. She described Akasha as a life force and referred to it as indestructible tablets of the astral light, recording both past and future human thoughts and actions. This actually doesn't have anything to do with the term Akasha. It was an interpretation that she made up, because a lot of times when people translate from, especially from Sanskrit, they don't know exactly what it means, because they don't go look at the root of the terms. You know, they just don't look into it long enough and precisely enough. So then this whole concept was brought into the New Age movement by Alice Bailey, you know, the one that brought neo-theosophy into the New Age, Aquarian age, and esotericism and all that. And she said, Akashic Record is an immense photographic film registering all the experiences and the reactions of the entire animal kingdom of experience and thought forms. But that she was saying that in the context of occultists being able to distinguish actual experiences from astral pictures created by imagination and desire. So it was completely outside of the real meaning, and then it was brought into even further ruined, let's say, this concept by Rudolf Steiner, anthroposophy. You know, he said, "Oh, Akashic Records is some writings in the context of civilizations such as Atlantis and Lemuria, so that all this history was recorded in mystical records." You know, now I don't know. It's nice and interesting, but it doesn't have anything to do with reality. The reality is that Akasha is the shining element behind all forms and material aspects of reality. But there is a relationship with blockchain, even if it's not direct, but we can say that maybe the correlation of the concept of the Akashic Records could be explored in the light of the fifth state of matter. And this maybe correlates to the interstellar idea. But so the four traditional recognized states of matter everyone knows is solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. But the fifth state of matter, it's been postulated by Dr. Melvin Vobson as to being information. So information has mass, and this guy is a professor of physics, you know, at the University of Portsmouth. And I found this concept, this hypothesis, very interesting, because he's trying to explore the fundamental nature of reality and information theory in regards to the quantification and compression and storage and transmission of information. Here comes the blockchain. You know, he came up with the concept of information as the fifth form or state of matter, and he proposes that information has mass and that elementary particles store information about themselves. So as if they were human DNA, and if proven correct, this hypothesis, it would actually revolutionize physics, and it would suggest that information is as real as any other state of matter. So both of these concepts, Akashic Records and the fifth state of matter, we could say that they touch upon fundamental aspects of existence in terms of knowledge, information, and the fabric of reality. So the production of the digital information, like the blockchain, could be seen as a sort of conversion of matter into bits. this comes in. This reminds me of what has been said about the digital and physical and digital. You know, the connection between physical and digital through the blockchain. So with this in mind, it's maybe interesting to postulate that an infinitely growing immutable record of information like the BSV blockchain could represent a form of Akashic recording technology that could encode the fifth state of matter into a highly organized form. But unfortunately, I think that physical constraints make it very unlikely to be possible because of the quantization, you know, of the necessity of looking at the quantum state of matter. So this is not recorded into the blockchain, which actually records. It's a blockchain in this sense is a subsystem, and it can be useful for providing a record of already encoded information. I don't think it can be brought to the point of having to do with Akashic records in the term of original quantum state information about matter, which is already present in matter anyway, according to Melvin. And this hypothesis, they are trying to make it verified or not. But it's a very interesting concept. So this is a fascinating subject, and I was trying to dig into it since quite a while. But the only thing that I would like to point out here is that I don't think the blockchain can be that kind of at that kind of level of encoding information that is thought to exist by these occultists who talked about Akashic records, even misinterpreting what Akasha is. So this is a little bit the resume of my thinking about the whole situation. And thank you for providing this space, because this is a very, very fascinating subject.
Wow. Okay. So that was okay. So there's a fifth element of matter. It says it's the quantum. From what I just learned from you, it's a quantum element of matter. Sounds like so. That's you know.
Well, the idea is that the information that matter has about itself is already encoded into matter itself at the quantum level. So in a way, all the information about the characteristics of matter is part of the mass of matter itself, which has implications, by the way, for deleting information, because we have to provide energy. So one of the hypotheses that came out from Melvin's studies is that if we convert convert all matter into bits and bytes, into information at the electronic level, we need to use up all the matter that actually exists in the universe. So it would disappear, basically, at the end of it. It would disappear as it is now. The matter itself would disappear, because it would be just bits and bytes. Okay, that's one of the consequences of this line of thought. But of course, it has to be proven. It's not been proven yet.
Okay, so anyone have their hand up? Feel free to unmute any of the speakers if you guys have any comments. Matt, I mean, he mentioned the age of Aquarius on there, and the connection here. So if you're available, I'd love to get your comments on how you can tie any of this together.
Yeah, sure.
I'll chime in on it.
Okay, who's first? Cryptos, you want to?
No, go, please go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll chime in when he's done.
Matt, you're up.
Okay, well, that's kind of why we're here, right? Is to connect the dots, and how does this all relate to technology, Bitcoin in its original design? So I like everything I've heard. I think it's all part of this awakening process that we've been in, for me personally, since 2011. So of every stone I've turned over, my deduction is that we have entered the age of Aquarius as of the Mayan prediction being December 21st, 2012. So my awakening began just before that. I've been on this road for a long time. And I think if anyone's in this group right now, like, you're probably quite awakened yourself, which is the polarity to being woke. Woke is kind of this manufactured illusion of, self knowledge, self realization. Um, but yeah, so the age of Aquarius, that's kind of where we're at. And Aquarius is an air sign, contrary to the two waves that we see. That symbol looks like the ocean, looks like water, but it's actually an air sign. And an air age is influenced by technology. And this is like the presentation I gave at the S-Script Hackathon in San Francisco. I covered like what are the signs of this air age, and the spelling of sign, I use SINE, like a sine wave. And these sine waves absolutely could contain information as part of its own existence. And how does that connect to the technology, to BSV? Well, it's data, big data. That's like that is like the emerging industry of the future, is like data management, which basically is the Akashic Records. But we're here to basically walk between two worlds of the seen and the unseen. So to me, it's the same thing. If we're going to really solve the problems on this planet, then we need to do it in the physical form, and that's where Bitcoin comes in. But those same problems almost have a mirror in the unseen realm, right? Like the Akashic Records. So, the more that we can mirror the what's real, which ironically the unseen is more of, it's not controlled. It's like just natural order and truth, light and truth. That's like the unseen realm that we can tap into now. But if we can somehow mirror that into this physical world, so now we're bringing that truth and that light and the knowledge in the form of data on chain. That's what we're here to do, in my opinion. So, the question is like, kind of how this whole conversation started is like, is this an organic unfolding, or is everything all staged and scripted? And as time goes on and more events present themselves, I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. I think that there is a divine plan, and there's also uh, a manufactured plan uh, going on, and then there's just us we're just coexisting, and we're a part of it, and that's like the organic thing. So this is a huge opportunity, to basically just celebrate the fact that we're alive through this transition, this time period, and have fun with this technology, and have fun with our awakening, and solving problems is fun. I mean, in my opinion, it's fun. So like, we can figure out like a good place to start coming together and uh, bringing the best of the leaders and teachers and healers, and the best researchers and inventors and journalists and everything. Bring them to Bitcoin. Bring them on chain. This could come through a whole bunch of different web application interfaces. But I know that in my lifetime, my goal is to, turn ageofaquarius.org into a Web3 application interface to the Bitcoin blockchain, where anyone can plug in and share their truth and share the truth as they've, been gifted the experiences and opportunities to discover it, to pull it from that unseen Akashic realm and bring it into this reality. But to put it on chain, uh, makes it immutable, and it makes it accessible to all. And that's like the tipping point of this awakening. That's where there's no excuse. You'd have to shut off the internet or the power. Otherwise, anyone who can tap into the internet and go into these Bitcoin archives, they can learn as much or as little as they want to, or as they're able to. Uh, so I don't know. It's kind of just said a lot, but I think somewhere in the middle is where this meets. There's a divine plan for this Aquarian age. You know, it says it on the dollar, new order of the ages, talking about the new world order for the Aquarian age. That's all out there, you know, hidden in plain sight. But here we are scratching our heads like, well, is this a good plan for us, and how do I fit into it? Um, so, you know, uh, I don't know, man. I'm just
Matt,
thinking at one,
it's a your
yeah,
insight is super valuable, man. I want to just help to keep lifting you up because what you're bringing to the table is
please.
super important and highly, divinely inspired. So thank you for sharing your perspective here.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, I feel like I've shared a lot of research and ideas, and I've kind of led by an example, I think, enough to where I don't feel compelled to preach. You know, I just want to maybe take questions and just teach from my experience and what I know. I feel like that's kind of, you know, my best foot forward, and not just in this call, but in future calls and stuff. Um, you know, so if anyone has any uncertainty around why BSV is the real Bitcoin, I can, you know, I feel like I could prove why, you know, and you're just not going to get that out in the mainstream. Um, you know, and if anyone, you know, is unsure what the heck the Aquarian age is or if we're in it, well, I can, you know, prove as best I can, but ultimately, um, you know, what I'm looking for is just build a platform so I can start to attract all of the best minds and people to help like prove this together, you know, because uh, that's what we need. That's like the consensus that we need. You know, I'll say we're in the age of Aquarius, and you know, I declared it publicly in downtown Orlando on 2/2/2022. Um, you know, at the Walt Disney Amphitheater. There was like not even 200 people there, but I did it. I publicly declared that we're in the age of Aquarius, but it didn't matter because the whole world has to be on the same page. And I do believe that it starts with us. It starts with this community, and we can't do it without this technology.
Right.
That's why I'm
That's
here.
the missing. That's the missing link. So over to you, Crypto Spartacus, and I see Brett's joined us in a moment. But Crypto Spartacus, you were up next, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything he was just saying. But in particular, what you were saying about whether you're unsure of whether or not this is kind of happening organically or according to some sort of a plan. Again, I also agree that it's a little bit of both. I personally, like, I grew up Christian. I grew up I went to Catholic school when I was younger. I did Catholic school for my full 12 years of government schooling. And it's actually something I got really interested into, like secret society type stuff, when I left high school, pretty much, and I went to university. I
What was your
became aware of
was it
all
a
these different
video
groups.
or what was your first
I kind of
exposure
wanted
to
to figure
that?
out what. Sorry.
What was your first exposure to the secret society stuff? Was it a video or a person or?
Honestly, it's probably like just exposure to like Dan Brown books or something like that, or like the Da Vinci Code coming out. Just kind of put it on my radar. It wasn't something that was ever really on my radar when I was younger, but I think it was because of that reason that I got really interested in it, and um, just because it was so foreign to me. I was like, oh, what is all this stuff? There's like secret groups of people that do stuff behind closed doors, and like they don't share that information with everyone. It's kind of interesting. What are they up to, right? So I kind of just dove into the rabbit hole of looking through all I could learn about those types of groups. And one thing that came uh, in front of me, someone put it in front of me that the number 322 being linked to the Skull and Bones organization, someone alleged to me that that number is a reference to Genesis 3:22. It's a Bible verse from Genesis, where God pretty much comes down and sees that Adam and Eve have eaten from the tree of knowledge. But in this verse, God speaks as if he's a person in a group of people. So it kind of depicts the Lord God in Genesis as a group of people who were controlling Adam and Eve and trying to restrict what Adam and Eve were free to do. And if you look at that Bible passage, it's kind of hard to interpret that in any other way. And in any other version of the Bible, if you go and look at older 1611 versions of the Bible, that doesn't really change. Like there's certain things that got changed as Bibles were um, retranslated throughout the years, but if you find really old versions of the Bible, that particular verse 322 hasn't been changed a whole lot, and it kind of implies that the God of the Bible was a group of people who were pretty much engaging in drug prohibition against another group of people in order to control them. And I sort of think that that's how human history has played out for the last several thousands of years, where there are drugs that we are prohibited from even knowing about sometimes, that the intellectual and the political elite, the people, the priestly class that was controlling the world before we had kings and queens, and the kings and queens that have been running the world until we had democracies, and all the criminals who go into politics and control the world. A lot of these people have had knowledge of these things for thousands of years, and they've been giving themselves a cognitive advantage over the rest of us by using drugs that are nootropic in nature. Like, if you look in the Amazon, the people that use ayahuasca ritualistically in the Amazon, you can identify those people from brain scans because the corpus callosum, the region of your brain that connects one hemisphere to the other hemisphere, is so much more robust in people that have used ayahuasca throughout their lives that they can be identified from brain scans because their corpus callosum is so much more developed than an uninitiated brain. So these things actually cause brain changes. They actually change the structure and form and shape of your brain in such a way that you can actually change what you're capable of. I mean, you can make significant changes to brain structure through the ingestion of these drugs, and they're prohibited. They've been prohibited for thousands of years. Like throughout all of human history, you'd get in trouble for having these things. But I mean, I was in Thailand for the last 2 years. I came back a few months ago, and I can go down the store. Within walking distance of my house. There are 3 stores in Barrie. I live just about an hour north of Toronto in Canada now. And there's 3 stores within walking distance of my house where I can go now and I can buy magic mushrooms, LSD, and dimethyltryptamine from a storefront location, and the storefront business has been issued a license by the city of Barrie. So my local government is giving municipal business licenses to storefront operations that are selling these things right in downtown Barrie now. I think it's part of what you're saying about the age of Aquarius is that it's going to be an age of revealing. A lot of the things that have been done to us for thousands of years for the sake of controlling us, it's all coming to light now. We're figuring out that we're pretty much all been enslaved by central banks who create money out of nothing, charge interest on that money they create from nothing to our governments, and they force the governments to make us all work for them. How long do you think that can last when everybody knows that that's what's happening? There's going to be some changes here because, like, now that everybody can figure out that the banks have enslaved us through our governments, we're not going to take this much longer. There's going to have to be a change. There's going to have to be major changes that come because a lot of what's been done to us has been done in the dark, and now that it's coming to the light, it's not going to keep happening that way. People just aren't going to take it anymore.
Beautiful, man. That's freaking a great little segue over to our main man, Brett Banafee. Brett C. Banafee's with us now on stage. So you may have missed BSV Panama's introduction on the Age of Aquarius. I don't know if you heard that, but he went really deep. I'm sorry, not Age of Aquarius, but the Akashic Records. He went deep into like the history of it and the whole background. So we're gonna have to go back to him, but I want to have you chime in on and see how you're doing, Brett. What's going on?
Hey everyone. Yeah, I did catch the end of BSV Panama. And thank you so much for having me on today. This is my favorite subject. And what I love about this is that I found other people that also love this subject. So these spaces are so great because we get to come in and we get to, learn from each other. And, I just wanted to say, I learned from you, Matt. I learned from you, Crypto Spartacus, BSV Panama, so much. Jay Suspides, I don't know if you guys know him, but he's from Handcash, also someone that taught me a ton about Walter Russell, someone that I really wasn't that aware of, but that I'm finding, has a lot of wisdom for me in this period of my life. And, I think there's, I'm not sure exactly where I want to go with this. Maybe it's just an intro, so I'll just, leave it after maybe this final thought here, but just that, I find that I'm in a phase of my life, I guess, right now where it's retrospective, but it's also prospective. So it's not just, what I've learned and where what has gotten me here, because all of us are here for a reason, right? We didn't, if you found BSV, if you found, information about the Akashic Records and, your own spiritual journey and, the ways that relates with, but also breaks from tradition, there's a reason why you got to this point, but it's also, so it's the, having the love for the history and the wisdom that got us here, but also, what I see sometimes when we're alone and we're isolated, because there's not that many people on the planet for whatever reason, maybe we're just that far ahead of the curve, but it's very hard to find people that can, even begin to process some of this information, let alone, feed it back to you or give you a new take or a new slant on it or something like this. But, the way that I think of it is like, we all have our own mountain, so, and we've gotten to the top of that mountain, but when we get to the top, it's good to look back at the town that we came from and go, yeah, that's where I grew up. I used to live in that little small cul-de-sac over there, and now I'm up here on this mountain. But then it's also you just look around you and say, wow, there's a lot of other peaks out here. There's a lot of other places that we can traverse, and and there's the fun that's involved with that. You don't reach every peak all at once. It takes time. There's the journey that's part of the experience as well, and the experiential education that you get from testing some of these ideas and saying, okay, like, I like where this guy is coming from, or this young lady's coming from. Let me put it into practice for myself and see if I can, achieve some results from that, or, is it better as just a theory, or, so that's where I'll take it here, and just want to thank everyone for being on this call, because this is like you couldn't pick a more exciting subject for me to begin to get into.
Nice. Yeah, definitely an exciting subject, and great little intro there, Brett. Thank you. Mila, we haven't heard from you yet. Are you able to unmute? Mila? Mila, looks like you're not able to unmute. All right, we'll come back to you whenever you're, why don't you just put your hand up when you get your microphone working again and you join the audio. Casey, feel free to put your hand up if you want to chime in. Mila?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
there you
am
are.
here. I don't know how this works because I can't hear you.
Come back to you. Mila?
You just put your hand up when you get your microphone working again. Join the
Mila,
audio.
we're having audio problems
Casey,
from
feel
you.
free to put your hand up if you want to chime in.
Looks like, yeah, Mila, you looks like we've got some audio issues. You may want to drop down and join again. Awesome. Okay, so Casey, feel free to jump in or join. Raise your hand if you want to jump in at all. I know you may be working, but okay, back to BSV Panama. You had really gone deep on this subject. Can you unmute and just kind of fill us in on what your thoughts are from what you've heard so far?
What's the question?
Well,
exactly.
I'm trying to connect the dots here with this. Yeah, the way you framed this was like brilliant, and the connection between these 5 different elements of matter, and how the 5th one is the one that could potentially be relevant to the blockchain. So it's such an advanced.
Yeah.
Help us understand what you're thinking.
Okay, so the first point that I was making is that we ought to understand the origin of the word Akasha and Akashic Records, because it's a misinterpretation of the original concept. So the Akashic Records doesn't really have to do the origin with what has been said by occultists, but we could correlate it, even though it's not a direct correlation. We could correlate it to the 5th state of matter that has been postulated by Dr. Bobson, because he said his hypothesis is that matter itself at the quantum level contains the information about itself. So at this point, we could say, okay, there is an intrinsic, let's call it Akashic record within matter itself that could be decoded or re-encoded. The problem there is problem is physical. You know, the physical constraints for doing that. So we are not at the point where we can do that, and that's why I think if we think about the possibility of the blockchain to encode all the information, which is the subject of the discussion, is something that cannot happen, because the blockchain can encode information that is already encoded in words or data, and not at the quantum level of matter itself. So the correlation with the Akashic records, if we assume that the Akashic records is the collection of all the information of the universe, which might be accessible or not, is only possible through the blockchain via a second layer, let's say, of the information, which is what we talk about. You know, we talk about things, we formulate thoughts, and we formulate words, and we formulate numbers, and we formulate measurements. Those, they can be encoded into the blockchain, and the blockchain can be transparent and immutable and secure. All that is perfectly clear, but it cannot be directly correlated to the information that is within matter, encoded into the DNA of matter, according to the hypothesis from Melvin Wobson, which is still an hypothesis, but it's possible that it actually exists as a DNA of matter. But the blockchain itself, it's another level. You know, you cannot go with the blockchain and say, okay, the blockchain is going to be a record of everything that exists in the universe. It's impossible at the physical level, because of physical constraints. You see, unless maybe at some point we come to, I don't know, quantum computers, which I don't think is around the corner, but maybe at that point there is some kind of possibility, with the caveat that at that point I don't know if matter will be still existing as we know it, because there is a principle, Landauer principle, that says that if you convert all matter into information, matter actually disappears as matter. It becomes bits and bytes at the quantum level, and everything disappears. So that's what I was trying to convey with this analysis.
Okay.
Any question?
So, who's that? All right. So
The double slit experiment kind of verifies that, though.
double split?
The double slit.
No, that doesn't have anything to do with that. No. Let's not confuse things, because it's getting.
Matter behaves like a wave when it's not being observed, and when it's being observed, it behaves like a particle. That's the idea behind the double slit experiment. But that's also the way that video games render graphics to the playable characters. Like, our universe appears to operate like a holographic simulation according to quantum physics.
Well,
if that's the
yeah, that's
you might be in a sort of simulation that is just a computer program.
This is a spin-off of the theory, but what we're talking here about is information that is encoded into matter. You see,
right? But
at the quantum level.
What if all matter is just information, and it's just like through our own observation, everything appears to be physical and solid, but when we're not observing it, it behaves like a wave. So that's kind of the whole idea. That's why so many scientists believe now that we exist in some sort of simulation. It's the way that matter renders itself, whether or not it's being observed. It's very similar to the way graphics are rendered only when you're looking at a particular part of a video game landscape. The landscape outside of your outside of your character's line of sight doesn't get rendered. It only renders what the observer could actually see. The idea that the physical reality that we live in operates that way, really, it shouldn't behave that way unless we're in some sort of simulation or a hologram. And I mean, most of physics, like all of the new physics and quantum physics kind of indicates that physical reality manifests the same way that holograms do. That's why you can do quantum locking, and you can have, well, not quantum locking, but it's why you can, I forget the term for it. You can pretty much synchronize atoms that are not in the same location. I forget the term for it, but it's what makes that possible.
Okay. Do you mind if I jump in?
It's called
Go ahead,
quantum
Casey, and then I want to jump in here. Go.
quantum entanglement.
Quantum entanglement. Okay. So before you respond to that BSV panel, if you could reserve that for a moment, I want to go to Cam. But before I do that, I just want to recap on this thread here that the reason that inspired this space was the Crypto Spartacus thread, where he talked about the scene in Interstellar where the main guy pushes the book off the shelf, was made, from this, and then this Akashic Records subject came up, and then Cam chimed in and said, BSV game theory is logic for reconnecting man's consciousness back to the Akashic Record. And then, Cam, you started posting more about this. And so without me just reading your stuff, why don't you chime in? You and I have been talking off the line a little bit, back and forth. So how you doing, buddy? Welcome.
Yo,
Good to hear you again, my man. You're up in Canada,
yeah.
aren't you?
Yeah. I'm not the best with mornings. I just got a coffee here, so you
Good
guys
morning.
don't mind.
Good morning. So yeah,
Good
you
morning.
you were really adding a lot of value on this thread. So what is your theory behind this game theory approach with the logical reconnection of mankind's consciousness with Bitcoin SV and the Akashic Record?
So I kind of went through this really intense awakening process where I started kind of researching all of the what do you call it, like the potential deception in history, and especially with the Romans. And like I have ancestry relating back to like Scotland and Ireland. And I feel like what happened was potentially the Romans might have disconnected the Irish, like Gaelic bloodlines from their ancestral memory, which which kind of like puts you into this waiting for Godot fugue state where you don't really know why you're here because you're disconnected from that memory. And you're just kind of like in this this unknowing state. And so we have all of this junk DNA or what they call junk DNA in our body. And I believe that DNA, like I learned through Dan Winter's work, that our DNA is like an antenna. And also our DNA can hold information. And I believe that, and also I have chronic pain issues, and I have experimented with, like Crypto Spartacus, I experimented with DMT a little bit. And I've come to find that you can kind of activate your body as a vessel into like a state of forgetfulness, into like a state of knowingness. And I believe that has to do with this antenna connection that your DNA can have with the cosmos. And so the reason why we aren't like activated into that mode, my theory is that it's because we have all of these like guilt, fear, shame, and doubt frequencies in our environment, that kind of like it keeps us kind of disconnected from our internal Akashic record that's in our DNA. Like to connect to the Akashic, like a big part of it is connecting your vessel itself to its history, but also it seems like the pineal gland is some kind of transmitter or receiver kind of type thing, because it has like these radial crystals in it. And so I kind of became obsessed with this idea that our human body is kind of like a biotechnological vessel that is meant to activate in this way to the Akashic record, or whatever you want to call it, like the cosmos, the Akashic record. But sometimes when I've experimented with DMT, kind of like what Crypto Spartacus was describing, I've had these moments where it's as if you are connected to some kind of infinite knowledge thing, that like whenever you have like a question, the answer comes to you at the speed of thought. And then that reminds me of the game theory of Bitcoin in itself, because of just the way Craig describes it. It's almost like a metaphor for what I experienced, but on like a global scale. And so also with the game theory of Bitcoin, of how it kind of I kind of like to think of it as if this protocol secures the entire internet and creates like a more safe environment for people. They won't be so held down by all those fear, guilt, and shame frequencies. And then our vessels will start hatching, so to speak, out of our eggs, and we'll all start connecting together into like a peer-to-peer fashion. And I guess that's what I'd say, like just off the bat.
So, to recap, I'm reading your pinned post. It says BSV is the redemption protocol. Incentivizes unconditional transactions, giving love, service to others, as opposed to the current Babylon system we are in that incentivize vampiric conditional transactions, taking ego service to self. It's a huge difference. So, yeah,
Can I just add there? I think another thing you were touching on there is the great singularity that William Henry talks about with the era that we're moving into, where humanity needs to make the choice of, are we going to choose transhumanism or transfiguration, which is where we activate our light bodies and have access to all knowledge without needing to connect to the internet or the blockchain at all. So I think we're definitely at that moment in time where we need to make a definitive choice with our free will. Which direction are we collectively going as a species? And William Henry is a really great person to look into for information on how to actually activate the light body, so you can choose spiritually the path of transfiguration versus transhumanism.
Yeah, and when I had these kind of experimental things with the DMT stuff, I was able to activate the light body or plasma body or whatever you want to call it, and it did appear like they say in the New Age community that 666 carbon, it like everything looks like it's 666 carbon, but then it turns into like a crystalline plasma type structure, and that's exactly what I experienced. So I also experienced like as if you were wearing like augmented reality goggles, and could see like augmented reality, but without augmented reality goggles. So it's like you don't need the technology, exactly what you're saying. It's all inside of you. And the technology that we experience on the outside is, in a way, it's already inside of us. and Bitcoin and the internet, it's almost like these are just tools, like lattices for our consciousness as our consciousness is evolving around it.
Well, think about like if you look into transfiguration and the monks and all the people that have actually done the process of transfiguring, they literally like leave their body and only it's the hair, skin, and nails that are left behind. So it's if this is a simulation and we're here to learn and evolve and grow, like, and there's a reincarnation grid, you know, people talk about and stuff, where you just keep coming back over and over and over until you learn how to actually do this. I think this is the ultimate goal of a human here, to actually leave this plane, leave this dimension, is you have to learn how to do this. So it's kind of a big deal.
And so you're really making the archaics connection here. So I'm wondering if anybody else knows about archaics on this call. If you want to just raise your hand or thumbs up or whatever, I'm just curious to know. Casey, I know Mila does. Who else?
I would agree with what was being said there.
Okay, Cam, you do? Crypto Spartacus?
Yeah.
You know about archaics?
I probably know it as another term, but the idea is familiar to me.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the archaics connection. Really getting Jason Bashir's would be a huge level up for all this information, you know, because that's he wrote the Chronicon around with many other books, which he's connected the history over the last 6,000 years of all the human events that have been logged through authors, not through our books in school, but through actual authors. And he's logged them, saying that this author cited this and this year, so we know that this date is accurate, and then we know this date is accurate because of this author. And so he's publishing all these different citations to log our history and the timeline that we're actually on, along with many other inventions, but discoveries. But the Chronicon, I think, is his greatest his greatest work, known work. So I don't. Cam, are you familiar with him at all? You said.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had it. I got obsessed with archaics. The thing with him though is that I don't think he would believe in like the light body stuff. He doesn't really entertain like ET stuff and all I mean by ET is like I see the ET stuff as similar as the DMT stuff. But what he discovered, especially with the 2178 paradox, is mind-blowing. And him finding, he also found through his chronology all of these palindromic, like mathematical patterns in history that suggest we're in some kind of matrix.
Simulation.
Yeah.
Simulation theory.
Yeah, he's great. Right now he's questioning the Fomenko 1000. Like some people believe in this Anatoly Fomenko theory that we have 1,000 years of missing history. If you see his posts right now on Twitter, he's challenging that notion with his chronology. But yeah, the idea of reverse engineering our chronology and then like reassembling it into the immutable record of BSV, I find that concept to be fascinating because that could help us reconnect with our ancestral memories.
Can you help explain that right there, what you just said a little further? Because I've been trying to understand it and be able to articulate that myself. Yeah, the connection between the immutable record and with our history.
Yeah, it's just like it's just the idea, like for me in particular, like I think there's some kind of missing history around the Irish High Kings. I've heard that Gaelic and Hebrew are very similar. And I heard that there was some kind of Druid massacre, I guess by the Romans. And then this also ties into the Tuatha De Danann, who were said to have like mystical powers in Ireland, and they could do like necromancy on the battlefield. And there's like real stories about this in history that seem like fantasy, but it could just be that they were activated, right? And they had some kind of like higher activation going on. So I feel like maybe Rome kind of turned off the pineal gland of the whole entire world.
How did you learn about this stuff, Cam? What is your background?
This was all just from my awakening. So these ideas it could have just came from the Akashic. Like what I would do is I would kind of think of ideas and then I would search them on Google. And that's kind of how I went through my awakening. So I would kind of reverse engineer logic myself through thinking about it. And then sometimes ideas will just pop into my head. And that's kind of what I believe is probably the Akashic record or whatever you want to call it. But information just kind of comes to me sometimes, like in a flash.
Crypto Spartacus has his hand up.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to chime in on that. There's some connection in my own research to what he was saying there with how when the Romans encountered people who understood that certain drugs give you access to these realms, they slaughtered those people because they didn't want the average person to know this. This is something where if you look through the history of the Roman Empire, the cult of Mithra was using magic mushrooms. And they didn't want ordinary people to know that magic mushrooms existed, that these were drugs that you could go out and find in the cedar forests of Lebanon, that they pretty much encouraged people not to eat these things because they were hard to find. They couldn't use agricultural practices to grow mushrooms back then. They couldn't control the growth of these drugs. And because they had to the only way of finding them was to forage for them after rainfall because they couldn't control the growth of it. They couldn't plant spores and grow mushrooms the way they could other crops back then. They considered it a divine fruit, a divine drug from the heavens sent from the gods that emerged after the rain, as if it was sent from the gods themselves. That's the way they thought about it back then because they couldn't control how these things sprang out of the earth. They thought of them as like a divine fruit. And really, like for thousands of years, we've had this.
The Romans thought that, or who? Or
the cult of Mithra. It was a drug cult that you could only you could only be initiated into this drug cult if you were a member of the Roman military or the government. So you pretty much had to be like a senator or like a general or a soldier. There were a few people like butchers who were allowed in because they had like ritual dinners and stuff like that, and they needed those guys their beef essentially, or like their cows to feed everybody. But it was this drug cult, and they largely forbade people from using the drugs that they were using, and then persecuted the people who knew about those drugs so that they wouldn't have to compete with them after the rainfall to find them. But I mean, this is just, there's lots of evidence of that sort of thing repeating throughout history. When the Europeans first discovered the people in South America who were using ayahuasca, I personally believe that that was the reason they decided to wipe those people out, because they had already, for a few thousand years, had a culture where they had been hiding these sort of experiences and substances from people. So when they encountered a society on the other side of the earth after crossing the ocean and finding all these people where their secret drugs weren't kept secret among the elite, but spread widely throughout the community, and everyone was allowed to learn these things and experience these things, they had to attack those cultures because they didn't want to go back home and have to explain to everyone that this other culture on the other side of the world was more advanced than them, because they were sharing all the things that they had hidden from everybody for thousands of years, because they didn't want to have to compete with the average person to find it because they couldn't mass produce it for themselves. And I think that's like something that's going to become more clear now that modern medicine has rediscovered these things, and we're trying to put like reasonable applications back to a lot of these substances that have been pushed out of our society by the people in charge for thousands of years. I think the rediscovery of these substances is going to reawaken aspects of the human consciousness that have been suppressed for the sake of making us more easy to manipulate and make us more docile. I think if people actually understood what's being done to us, that you had access to all these different drugs that expand your mind and your thinking and allow you to understand yourself in the world better. A lot of people think that drugs like this just kind of give you like a good kind of feeling, like a good high. It's not like smoking weed. It can actually be really unpleasant to have these sort of realizations where your mind is kind of thinking a lot faster than it normally does and assessing your life in a really critical way. That's often what these drugs kind of induce. It's not just necessarily a pleasurable trip, but it actually is an insightful experience where you'll learn more about yourself and the world around you by having the state of consciousness through which you look at the world.
Deep, man, deep. Bose has got his hand up on stage. Mr. Bose himself. How you doing, buddy? Looks like you're okay. Bose.
Yo, can you hear me?
No.
All right.
I hear a
I'm gonna
wind
go down.
tunnel. Come on back in a minute, Bose. Let's go on over to Brett Banifee. What's up, my man? Glad to have you back up. How you doing?
Hey, doing great. Yeah, thank you very much, and really enjoying the insightful conversation, especially what BSV Pan was saying. Really liked that you were talking about the fifth state of matter. This is something that, you know, I'm sure a lot of you are fans of Randall Carlson. Randall Carlson was on a podcast called the Concrete Podcast, I believe, with Danny Jones, I think, and he was talking about the lightning bolt technology, which you know, I haven't really delved into it, so but he was talking about the fourth state of matter, I should say. Of course, we know that there's liquid, gas, and then solid. And he was talking about the fourth state of matter being that plasma state, which is kind of like a disambiguated state, if I understand. You know, this, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but kind of you know, so if we compare these with the four elements, you know, the traditional four elements are like earth, wind, water, fire, right? Then we could say, you know, like they have some parallels. So gas, that has a parallel to, you know, the element of air. Liquid, obviously water. Solid, that's kind of parallel to earth. And then this disambiguated state is kind of connected with fire, I suppose. So this fifth state, you know, one of my favorite movies, if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out, The Fifth Element, it's more than just a great sci-fi film, right? It's also potentially this really insightful thing that about, you know, the way in which there's harmony between these four elements. And you know, like in the movie, I guess the fifth element is love or something like that, to that effect, right? The purity of devotion. I don't know exactly, you know, it's probably very interpretable what exactly the fifth element is, but you know, according to what BSV Panama is saying, it's also the encodement, I guess. So the encoding of oneself within oneself, even at the micro level. So, you know, this concept of there being, you know, the encoding of the very, very small, or of the very, very great within the very, very small. And likewise, you know, the encoding of the small within the very, very great, right? We see this as, we see like a fractal universe, which is something also, I guess maybe this might be a tangent, but, you know, some of these conversations about, you know, the simulation or the holographic nature of the universe, et cetera, you know, we can sort of also just lump that in with just the fractal nature of the universe. And we see the fractalization of the of you know, the golden ratio across all things, you know, at many, many different levels and layers of the universe's manifestation of itself. And so I guess, yeah, maybe I'll won't go too deeply into this, but just add one of my most recent kind of like really interesting looks into these topics. Well, first of all, you know, I've been very interested in the fourth dimension. I've been interested in the fourth dimension for a number of years now, really doing unpacking and exploring it. You know, when I first heard the concept of the fourth dimension, I just thought it was like, what's that?
What is it? Fourth dimension.
Oh, the fourth dimension. Okay, so yeah, you know, there's some people that would wonder, well, yeah, what is the fourth dimension? There, you could say that, okay, we know what the three dimensions are. It's length, width, and depth, right? It's the X, Y, and Z axis. So what is the fourth dimension? Well, in my explorations, you know, I got into the workings and the writings of Buckminster Fuller. I was sort of independently interested in all of these things, not really seeing a common thread, but Buckminster Fuller is really interested in this concept of the fourth dimension as well. So when we typically think of the three dimensions, like length, width, and depth, or something like that, the X, Y, and Z axis, we think of them as being at 90-degree angles to each other. So just like the X and the Y axis, if we just look at a two-dimensional graph, they're at 90 degrees to each other. And what Buckminster Fuller hypothesizes is that, you know, this is useful maybe in terms of like our abstract concepts of, you know, mathematical modeling or something like this, but that he argues that a closer approximation to how the universe manifests itself is not in these perpendiculars and these straight lines. We saw like Terrence Howard talking about that, you know, the universe doesn't compose itself within straight lines. It uses these curves and these you know, what Buckminster Fuller describes is that it's actually closer to instead of being 3 different 90-degree angles, it's 4 different 60-degree angles. And the fourth dimension is in some respects like it's a plot device in like a Bill and Ted movie or something like this. Like, you know, they use the fourth dimension to get back and with Rufus and George Carlin and you know, save the universe or something like this. That's all well and good from the sci-fi angle. But from the, you know, from just a mathematical model, the fourth dimension, it's not time. It's not the 3 dimensions of space and then time is the fourth dimension. It's actually an additional 4th spatial dimension. And the way it fits in Buckminster Fuller's model, it by basically intersecting or triangulating with the other 3 dimensions through 60-degree angles. And you know, you could describe it in a way as well, okay, so sorry if this is going on a tangent here, but I'll just give a quick visual model because I think visual models are really helpful. So when we're talking about things like, you know, the zodiac and the universe and the ecliptic, the planets traveling through the sky, etc., we divide the, you know, the section that the planets travel through, we divide that into these 12 parts. They're typically the zodiac signs. We were talking about the age of Aquarius, etc. And so this concept of 12 around 1, this has, you know, a symbolism to it that is more than just, you know, helping to orient ourselves to occurrences in space and time. There's actually a deeper symbolism to this, which is the 12 around the 1. This is also kind of, there's a gnosis element to this with, you know, the Christ figure and the 12 apostles, etc. So you can, if you take like a single sphere, right, you can construct 6 spheres around it. And so, you know, if we just think of that, just think of it for a second as a 2-dimensional surface, right? A single sphere in the center, 6 spheres around it. Obviously, 6 plus 1 equals 7, right? So now there's dimples within that. So if we, instead of thinking of it as a 2-dimensional structure, if we add a 3rd dimension, and now instead of them being circles, instead of them being circles, we think of them as spheres like marbles, then the 6 around the 1, it still produces it still produces 7, but now there's these dimples in the top, and you can put 3 marbles on top of that structure and 3 marbles below that structure. So what you get is the 12 around the 1. It's what Buckminster Fuller calls the atoms of closest packing. This would be how atoms try to nest within each other to use the maximum amount of to waste the least amount of space. So atoms are constantly trying to compact themselves in so that they can be the most efficient possible. And so this model, this 12 around the 1, it actually creates this cube octahedron or this vector equilibrium. Well, within this vector equilibrium, there is the model that Buckminster Fuller is talking about. There's 4 ways that you can create a circle that goes 6 around 1. So there's the one that goes all the way around like clock, you know, then there's the one that intersects from the 1, you know, or from the 2 to the 8. There's the one that intersects from the 10 to the 4, and then there's the one that intersects from the 12 to the 6. So you know, this is also familiar to people in terms of the pattern of the flower of life, etc. But so the three different dimensions in this model, instead of them being at 90-degree angles, they're at 60-degree angles, and they would be the 12 from the, if we're thinking of the clock, there's the 12 to the 6, there's the 2 to the 8, there's the 10 to the 4, but then there's a one that goes all the way around, because again, remember, we're talking about a 6 around 1, and so the original 6 that we visualized as being two dimensionals, that actually is a complete circle as well. So those are the four dimensions. What I've been those are the four intersections of space-time. And what I've been hypothesizing is the fact that these relate not just to the four cardinal, elements like earth, wind, water, fire, etc., but that these also relate with the four fundamental forces of the universe, which are gravity. I guess maybe that would be closer to earth. The electromagnetic force, the weak nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force. And so, yeah, so this concept of kind of the gnosis, the fifth element being that sort of self-gnosis or the exploration of that I've been getting really into recently. I encourage people to check out the film Black Hole. It's spelled with a W, so whole as in more than the sum of its parts. Black Hole. Yeah, Black Hole is a W, Nassim Haramein, and he goes into not just the inspiration of Buckminster Fuller and his shape, his deconstructing of the cube octahedron and the vector equilibrium and the four dimensions that produces. It's what's interesting about that as well is that it is the vector equilibrium is composed of a perfect blend between squares and triangles. So you have this concept of we keep going back in the space of saying, well, it's sort of both. Are we like loose in the world, just creating our own destinies, or are we a part of some plan and we're sort of both, right? Is the world composed of all squares or is it all triangles? Well, the vector equilibrium, this 12 around the 1, it's this beautiful marriage between these intricate shapes, these vital shapes. And just like anything, there's really so much to unpack there. The 64 tetrahedron, it nests on top of that cube octahedron. I won't go into that because that's an entirely different discussion, but he explores that in the movie, and I encourage everyone to check that out.
Awesome, Brett. Let's go deep here. Let's go on over to Bose. He's got his hand up here, and we'll go on over to if you're gonna Bose. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I came inside, so there's less wind. So I wanted to comment on Crypto Spartacus's talking about the suppression of psychedelics, and just give a few thoughts on that. Is that if you think about what psychedelics really are, particularly mushrooms, but also the later generations, they're kind of like steroids for the brain. And if a living organism can evolve by eating mushrooms and get smarter and brainier as a consequence of the way that the mycelia work, the way that they send signals between each other, and the neurons can grow and the brain can grow as a consequence of that, then organisms get very, very smart very quickly, the more access they have to those kind of psychedelic compounds. The problem a little bit is that when you form concepts, what you're actually doing is putting you're putting data in formations, you're creating little circuits, and you run an electrical current across that circuit in a particular pattern, and that pattern is information, right? It's information. That the degree at which you can put data in more and more complex formations, and the better you can compress those circuits so that you use a small amount of electrical current to create to stimulate the pattern, then the smarter you can get. Anyway, the problem to some degree is if you imagine, so what psychedelics do in some sense is they connect all of the neurons in the brain to all of the other ones, right? So instead of having these like really delicate informational structures that are very unique and have like discrete conceptual structures, architectures, if you connect every neuron to every other neuron simultaneously, then everything means everything else, which is not very helpful. Okay, it's a steroid effect, right? Because the whole brain starts to understand itself. But the problem is that it then understands everything as everything else, right? So this is the analogy would be like you open a thesaurus to look up a word or to look up what kind of word is related to other words. And you see under the list of related words, all the other words in the thesaurus. Well, that's not very helpful, right? Because if green also means red, then you're kind of fucked. So if you're, okay, you've got a species that's evolving in tandem with finding mushrooms and stuff like that, using the mushrooms to grow their brains over thousands of years. The powers that be don't make them illegal, don't make it illegal to be legal to use because they don't want the populace to evolve and be smarter. The powers that be tend to repress that move towards towards the neurons connecting to all the other neurons because it's not helpful, right? Because if everything means everything else, then you can't get anything done. So you imagine having a population that's just zoned out on mushrooms all the time or psychedelics all the time, they would just be useless. There'd be a bunch of idiots, right? There'd be perfect spiritual beings that were incapable of doing anything.
Useless idiots,
so,
they call them.
so there's that, and there's the other problem of supply, which you may only have a certain amount of psychedelic mushrooms. And so if you're in a position of leadership, like a Caesar, for example, then you may want to cultivate and keep those mushrooms to yourself. And you also might think that you have some kind of connection to the divine, which allows you to rule and allows you to have unique insights. And you might want to stop the population from having that. But you certainly want to stop the population, generally speaking, from getting drunk on that, because it's not really gonna help like a whole lot. So any of the supply issue means that you kind of keep them all to yourself, you make them illegal to use, and then you're only allowed to take them if you've reached a certain level of discipline. Then that discipline might be, the top of the Roman legionnaires' army or whatever it is, or, there might be some esoteric schools in which you are considered to be like safe to take these things, right? But actually, the only real test for initiation is, are you prepared to take them yourself, right? Because there's a lot of people that aren't. They're like, oh, well, I don't want esoteric knowledge. I can live without it, thanks. And so there's only a certain amount of people that will actually take them because they will disrupt the thinking of so many people. So in a sense, it's self-selecting. The people that want to open their minds to it will do so. Now, with Bitcoin, what was quite interesting was when it first arrived, really the first major use of it was as a delivery, kind of a delivery layer for psychedelics, right? So
Silk Road.
Silk Road. What people wanted was a censorship-resistant financial network. And what it turned out that what they really wanted to do was sell a lot of drugs. Now, if you think about the planet as an organism, right, a living brain, and it's very sick. And a lot of areas in the planet, a lot of neurons who are living around in different places on the planet, human beings, are sick, and they want to get a delivery, hypodermic delivery of psychedelics to them through the mail from anywhere in the world, and by the way, any kind of psychedelics they like. Now, Bitcoin opened up that market massively, right? Like I say, it's hypodermic. You basically get an injection of psychedelics through the post from the dark web, and you pay the person who's giving them to you using Bitcoin. And what happens is the payload is delivered to the subject receives a massive dose of like esoteric knowledge, essentially, from these psychedelics. They open up the Akashic Records, they look at all of the shit that's in their brain, right? Because all of the neurons are connecting to all of the other neurons simultaneously. So the thesaurus is somewhat useless, but it's also, amazingly expansive in terms of their capacity to synthesize knowledge, right? And condense and optimize algorithms so that they can understand bigger concepts with smaller amount of energy. So that's kind of the big picture. And then you get like free Ross and all of this stuff and the politics. So one of the primary reasons why BTC is so has such a high price, because people have put such a high value on that use case, right? It's a use case that Craig Wright hates, but who cares, right, about him? Like, basically, it's the user who's in control here. It's the customer who's in control. If they value that particular use case, they're going to value the culture that protects that use case, which in this case is the culture surrounding BTC. So that's all well and good. And of course that can change, but it's sort of missing the point, because their censorship resistance is somewhat, well, it's besides the point, essentially. The network that they've created just has a very low bandwidth. It has a very low capacity for delivering data. So they've limited the transactions per second so they can have, quote unquote, a censorship resistant network, so that they can protect this delivery network, this hypodermic psychedelic delivery network, in part. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but that's one of the things. When people talk about wanting censorship resistance, a lot of those people are people that want access to psychedelics. And the reason they want access to psychedelics is because it gets rid of all of that censorship in their brain, connects everything to everything else, so they can see the light, metaphorically, and they can understand concepts and esoteric knowledge and things that they think have been hidden from them. And they may have been hidden from them deliberately, or they may just be a consequence of ignorance, or it may just be a consequence of cultural ignorance. Who knows? But anyway, censorship resistance is the point from a psychological point of view. They want to know what they know. They don't know what they know necessarily unless they get access to psychedelic drugs. Anyway, they can have that with BSV. You know, ironically, right? They can have it with any cryptocurrency. That's not the point. The issue is that BSV actually is or sort of Bitcoin rather, you know, more properly speaking, is a network for trading data, right? So you think about the network, the public network, is just like the brain is a network of nodes connecting data to other data, information to other information. Now, what you want is a network which continuously scales, accounts for more and more information, where the cost of trading the information goes down and down and down as more information joins up, is encompassed by the network. And as the cost of trading information comes down, you get actually the psychedelic effect. More nodes have more access to more information at a lower cost, and the whole system gets healthier. It gets more connected, and you get, what would you say, a compression of the available information into smaller and smaller units that are more economical to run. They're more economical circuits. So you get a smarter planet, right? Eventually, with Bitcoin at scale, with all of the things in the economy accounted for, and people trading lots and lots of data, you get an ultra efficient, ultra healthy organism where knowledge can be distributed to places where it needs to be distributed to at a very low cost, in order for those places to get healthier as a consequence of having better knowledge, right? At the moment, what we've got is a kind of plague of ignorance. On the internet, there's lots and lots of shit that isn't true. Nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's in a state of constant information war. Everybody's being psyoped. They're fighting against each other. Really, it's like a bunch of people walking around in a dark room with blindfolds on, bashing each other over the head. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on.
Very good analogy.
Right?
Good analogy.
Right. So it's a coordination problem. We all need to live in the world together. We need to live in peace. We all need our needs met. And we need to basically not be attacking each other because we think that, you know, each other are after the stuff that we want. The truth is there's enough for everybody. It's just a distribution and a delivery problem that's the issue, right? So to some degree, the Bitcoin at scale can help that, but there's a whole bunch of competing networks that are trying to sort of essentially getting in the way, right? But they aren't really going anywhere. And part of the reason for that is they're based on sharing much more than Bitcoin is, which is based on competition. And people like sharing. So those models, as much as you might want to bash Ethereum or proof of stake, or they're here to stay, at least in the short term, not the long term. They will migrate in the long term. But the point is that, like, for now, at least, this is the world as it is, and you have to accept the world as it is and work with what you've got. So that's psychedelics and Bitcoin.
So though there's a connection
Yeah.
here that I want to just add, see if I comprehend the connection between the blockchain with this knowledge that you're sharing that is being pushed out to people at Bitcoin at scale at a fraction of a cost, where knowledge is getting, so all the knowledge is getting more and more connected as information gets cheaper and cheaper. And so that then is like a connection to the spiritual realm, it seems like, where you're saying that the consciousness, you become smarter and smarter, and your brains and your neurons begin to connect with like the universal consciousness.
Well,
I mean, how? Yeah. Help me
okay. So there's something called apophenia, which is like the tendency to make connections between things. Okay, so you might take two words that have the same sound and have two different meanings, and they're essentially, they have pointers in different directions. They have different connotations. They have different place on the conceptual map. Now, if you want to keep both of those concepts separately, you can do that, right? The problem is that it takes up twice as much space in your memory. So you need twice as much energy to move those concepts around. The natural economic thing to do is to run the two sounds together, so they point in in the same direction, and then you want to run the meanings together as well, and that's problematic, because that's when exactly what I was talking about before, where essentially, if in a thesaurus where you have one word that means all of the other words, it's not helpful. If you have the same sound that points in the same direction but means two different things, that's bad. So too much compression, right, in pursuit of economics is not helpful. You need just the right amount of compression. Now, you're thinking about permutations of many, many millions or even billions of concepts, right? And how the permutations of the connections of how they run together. With regards to the Akashic Records, a way of thinking about this is your brain is a library of all of the concepts in all of the world and all of time, condensed down into a single. So it's like it's a computer basically, right? And it's got all of those concepts in it, and they're compressed into different. They're compressed into signs and symbols. Now you're doing this computation very, very fast and all of this compression stuff so that you can think. And you're doing this apophenia thing as well. You're doing the links and the backlinks.
Apophenia is
apophenia.
Is what?
Apophenia. It's the tendency to make links between things. Now those links actually, they're somewhat delusional, right? They're not necessarily true.
Like
and
the thesaurus reference, where you see a word in the thesaurus and then every word in the whole thesaurus is linked.
A little bit, but what I'm really pointing out is more like conspiracy theorism, right? Where people take in a bunch of information, make a bunch of rather specious links, and they're just like, well, this means this because this actually confirms my bias about what I already want to believe, right? And you see this all the time in conspiracy theories and it's very annoying. They put a whole bunch of junk together, and then they think that it means something bigger, and they try to explain what that thing is to you, but the thing that they're trying to explain seems to just get bigger and more nebulous and more nebulous. And it's just a big conspiracy. Yes, it is a big conspiracy, but the thing is that, like, it's a conspiracy of one, in a sense. You're the conspirator. You're the one that's making sense out of things. And you either make sense concisely, in which case you can communicate that sense to other people, or you're talking bullshit and people don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? So apophenia and conspiracy theorism are more or less the same thing. Now, if you're trying to create, let me see, information retrieval systems, if you're familiar with PageRank in Google, the way that it works is, PageRank was the algorithm for Google, and basically what it is it's a bibliography of bibliographies, right? So in a bibliography, you write down all of the links, the references to your concepts in your essay at the end of your essay. And when you're reading the essay, you can check the links in the bibliography and go and read the references. Well, Google used to be the same thing. A website would have a bunch of backlinks to other websites. The websites would link to that. And the more backlinks they had, the higher up the search algorithm it would get, the web page would get, until it got to the top of whatever domain it was at. And the reason for that is because if a page is very much linked to and referred to and referenced, it's very valuable. It has a high weight, according to the brain that's looking for it. So if you're looking for something on Google, you want something to be of high quality. You want it to have a lot of links.
So that's how it used to work, or originally worked?
Yeah, and I think there's an element, I think there's a lot of that in there as well, but of course, it lends itself rather well to advertising, and that was Google's model. Essentially, is you can pay to get to the top of the search rankings, right? So you and the affiliate marketers are like, yeah. So what we'll do is our business model will be to link to other sites that pay us in order to get them up the search rankings. It's SEO, search engine optimization. Now, your brain is the same thing. When you're looking for a concept, you're looking for an answer, you're kind of querying your brain, and you want to get a whole bunch of backlinks to the most relevant thing so that you get a relevant answer to whatever question you're asking. And in terms of network theory, with Bitcoin, you throw out a whole bunch of endpoints, the public keys, public addresses, and you can attach different bits of information there, right? And you can economically weight the information by every time it gets paid for, retrieved, and you can say this information has been searched for and retrieved this many times, and therefore it's economically weighted this much. And so a very valuable concept, for example, or a very valuable search term can accumulate money. So instead of having advertising, I mean, you would still have advertising on that model, but it's just a way of economically routing searches over the network, or attaching money to the searches. So you can remodel the way that Google works on Bitcoin if you have a metanet where people are paying for things like searches or any traffic, essentially. Does that make?
If you have a metanet, right, where you're paying for the information through the searches,
right?
That would be the link.
Yeah. Now, you can think about all of the information in all of the world as the Akashic record, right? If you're using a computer to access that, it's all very physical. If you're using your brain and psychedelics to access that, then it's much more quote unquote spiritual, right? So there's an analogy there. And they do, obviously, one is a mirror of the other. You have a mechanistic physical mirror in the world outside of you, of what's happening inside, and vice versa. So there's a simulation going on there. But it's a bit, you don't want to make the lines too fuzzy and talk about Bitcoin and the Akashic records. You need to actually make the conceptual jumps between, the outside and the inside, and psychedelics, and how they all link together.
Maybe it's a good time to go back over to Cam and see if he digested any of that information, and see if he could chime in, because it was really him and Crypto Spartacus that inspired this space. So Cam, are you with us, buddy?
Yeah, that was great. I don't know what to.
Well, why don't you go back to your, the connection with the game theory that you're trying to articulating here? What is the, help us understand this game theory that you're talking about?
Well, when I think of Bitcoin, I'm just putting my headphones on here. When I think of Bitcoin, I think of it in the way that it will affect human nature, in the sense of having the security of the protocol, where it makes corruption expensive and incentivizes honesty and transparency. And I kind of speculate on what the impact of that will have on our humanity, more or less. Because, you know, like Bitcoin is going to obviously, I mean, I feel like it's destined to transform the world as a tool. And I feel like there's a certain kind of process for how to transform the world with Bitcoin. Like there's a logical way of doing it. And
let me just help refresh your brain a little bit with your post here. You wrote, I'm ultimately aiming to catalyze a movement around BSV peer-to-peer and decentralization. The spirit of the movement is already encoded in the Bitcoin protocol itself. It's what brought us together. It just needs to be expressed in a fun, human way that inspires us to work together for the greater good. I want to see this technology fulfill its purpose. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in it.
Yeah, like the technology is for us, right? It's like we're not here for the technology. I feel like there's a greater purpose for. I feel like Craig intuited the game theory as a kind of tool for unifying mankind's consciousness. Like we have like this illusion of separation between us, where we're not, our energies, like we are like consciousness in vessels, but our consciousness is not like we're so unique that our consciousness isn't really always connecting perfectly with each other, and we're kind of in this illusion of separation, even though we all are connected. So I see Bitcoin as a tool for human consciousness that will allow us to connect as like energetically as humans, peer to peer, in a way where it starts dissolving that illusion of separation. And that this is why you see, like, I believe in this concept of this internet awakening that we're going through. Like there's a reason why all of the knowledge on earth has been put into like a melting pot, and why this globalism idea exists, and why the internet is interconnecting us all together. It's because in a way, it's almost like consciousness got shattered into this illusion of separation, and now like the internet is stitching consciousness back together, if that makes sense. And Bitcoin is like the last piece of the puzzle. Like once that's integrated into the protocol level of the internet, it kind of recapitulates our consciousness back together, like our collective consciousness.
How does it bring the consciousness back together in your theory? How does that connect there?
So when you go through the awakening, you start having like all of these experiences where you connect with other people in mysterious ways. And I've been trying to figure out that phenomenon, like the phenomenon of synchronicity. It's almost like it's almost like things start becoming sort of more magical. And that's, I mean, I'm just saying that because that's what it has seemed like with myself. And
can you give me an example?
Well, like, you know, just having things happen in your life where there's no other explanation. Like it seems like it's like some kind of divine synchronicity. I think that these divine synchronicities have to do with the fact that the internet is kind of reconnecting consciousness back together, and our vessels are beginning to vibrate at a higher level. And it's almost like the earth is starting to go through a giant, massive Kundalini awakening. And so when you're disconnected and you're alienated, these magical things, like these synchronicities, don't really happen as much. But once your DNA starts vibrating on like a higher level, you start having like this interconnected symphony with other people. And this kind of this graceful like connection with other people that starts happening, I think is important for people to work together.
Yeah.
Like like just recognizing that we are all fractal pieces of the whole, and that we all have like a purpose, and there is some like I do believe there is some kind of divine plan that's unfolding, and I see that the game theory of Bitcoin is very key to that. And just getting back to the idea of disincentivizing crime like worldwide, just that idea in general, like on a practical level, like if there was no incentive for crime, that like worldwide, that would make living on Earth so much more comfortable and secure. And so you're not living in those fear vibrations anymore, because that's all we're used to, right? All we're used to is living in this like this world of lies where basically everyone's kind of indoctrinated, and we're all kind of confused about reality itself.
Which side of the fence we're on, red or blue or black or white, right? That's the
and I kind of see like the whole, like the reason why this is happening is because there is some kind of plan to like connect everything back together into this melting pot. And this force you might want to call like satanic or evil, like their role is for doing that. And that's why they use trauma. There's like trauma-based mind control techniques for stitching everything back together. And it's also meant, like the role of that is to also scare the shit out of us so that it catalyzes our growth.
The fear, you mean? The fear?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the goal of the fear, is to stop our growth.
No. It's to catalyze our growth, because it forces us to look at our own fears when we see like how dark the world is, right? Like, the only way to herd humanity back together is through trauma, because you can't do it through love, because we're already disconnected from each other. So some people would call them the fallen angelics. They use trauma-based mind controls to herd us all back together. And this might all be coming from Rome, that cut us off from our ancestral memories, to build this great work of this global melting pot, so that we would work towards building something like the internet, so that we would reconnect back together to get back to the frequency from which we fell from, that we don't remember because we're in some kind of like
Simulation?
forgetfulness state.
Forgetfulness state. Okay. And so how does it the connection between logging that on the blockchain somehow connect to the Akashic Records? Can you again, like how is that connection made again? And I'm asking it totally curious because I want to learn more about that connection.
Well, I mean, I kind of see like the one universal triple entry ledger as like the truth ledger, right? So I guess it all comes down to transitioning out of the world of lies into the world of truth. Does that make sense?
Going into the world of truth on chain through, and by doing that, it opens up, so it logs the truth on the record. So we begin to connect on we begin to evolve consciousness.
Yeah, and I think we're supposed to activate our vessels. Personally, I think we're supposed to do that, and the way that we can do that is through accessing the truth and being able to discern lies from truth, whatever that means, because it could mean different things to different people. But yeah, I feel like this one universal ledger is like meant to be. Like we have one consciousness, we have one internet, and so there has to be one like protocol for bringing it all back together.
Yeah.
and it seems like there's a process for doing this. Like it can't be bypassed. And I don't think you need drugs. Like everything Bose was saying there, about how BSV can be that link. We don't really. I think like we're supposed to raise our frequency as individuals, in a way where like our insecurities start melting away, our fears, our guilt, and then once that starts happening, we will activate as humans like on a higher frequency. And I believe this is what's ultimately happening on a global scale.
Nice. Well, that's a good time for Mila to chime in with her hand up here on the human connection. Mila, let's hear what.
Yeah.
All
Hey.
right, now we got you.
Yeah, it makes me think of how I see that truth ledger makes sense for me with, when you think of things like payments and contracts and stuff like that, then it makes perfect sense. But when it comes to information, right, then we can put anything on the ledger that isn't necessarily true. And so then it's suddenly a whole different story. And I will also agree with, according from my own experience too, that drugs are not necessary, but for some people it becomes the catalyst or trigger, if you will, or inspiration or something that starts opening them up. And so in my experience, I have had, since childhood, this other way of seeing things and registering things that I felt like nobody else was registering. And in the past, maybe, I don't know, 2 decades or so, I've been meeting people that because of psychedelics, they started having realizations. And it always was blowing my mind because they'd be talking about things that I had these realizations without drugs. And so I will definitely agree with that is not necessary for everybody. But so, to look at truth ledger as something that would connect us as human beings, I don't know. I would say that just like the internet is itself an imitation of the origin connection that we come from, where you can say, yes, we are all one, and here it's a little bit like, yes, we are, and at the same time we're not. And just as much as we're all the same, just as much are we different. So this perspective that we have in this world, which is extremely, it's a tiny bit of the whole thing of existence, infinite intelligence, God, call it what you will, love, whatever, Allah. It's such a limited reality here, right? We're condensed. Only a tiny part of us is coming through here, through this body. And so the perception that we can have in this world is, to my experience and feeling and understanding, is too small to ever even comprehend all this stuff that we're talking about enough and accurately. And so there's all this information out there in books and whatever, and it's such a pile of mixture of guessing and theorizing and trying to explain experience that one has had, which in my experience is so difficult because I might have had a really profound experience, and I actually have a lot of them, but the minute that I start to try to explain it to somebody else, then as life goes by, I become more and more aware of that we all have, a perception that is different enough to understand things very differently. So I could explain up and down all day long, for days on end even, and I'm never going to be able to convey exactly what it is that I experienced and what it means and what I'm seeing, and and so in the same way, with this perception that we have here is just too tiny, so it's absolutely amazing that we are at a place where some of us can gather and have these conversations and start stretching the mind more and opening up all this stuff. And but it's something to me something that, okay, it's an awareness that we have to have, and it's an eternal dance for as long as we're here in this tiny reality. And yeah, that's necessary, but it's sometimes it's also like the more we talk about something, the more we are getting so close to how it really is, but at the same time we're also getting away from exactly how it really is. And so it's like I've started more and more to say that nothing is fixed. Nothing is fixed, rigid. Everything is always developing and moving and going a bit up and down and left and right. And just when you think that you're like exactly on point, then it's changing a little bit already, you know? So yeah, I don't know, but back to that truth ledger, you know, yeah, truth ledger regarding some things, but you know, you can put fake history on it, you can put so much nonsense on it at the same time, right?
You can, becomes accountable. So it's yeah, well, wonderful. Bose, you got your hand up now as well. Did you want to chime in here?
Oh, I don't know if I had. I think there must be a glitch. Yeah, I do have my hand up mentally though. I wanted to I wanted to weigh in on something, but I'll let Crypto Spartacus go ahead, and then if I remember what it was I wanted to say, I'll chime in again.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that really I think before we try to put everything onto the blockchain, we kind of have to address that our governments don't give us freedom over our own minds, and putting everything onto the blockchain before we've found a remedy to that problem, I think will create way more problems than it will solve. I don't think that we're at the point right now where we've evolved consciously enough to do that yet. And I think it will end disastrously if we try to put everything onto the blockchain right now, because we have all these authoritarians in power and in government, and it will not be good for us to give them all of that information. That information will be used against us to go after people who are committing victimless crimes. If you're someone who's in a country where they might kill you if you have these sort of drugs, like there are places in the world where you might go to jail for a really long time or even be sentenced to death for having these things. We don't want to give governments the power to monitor everyone to that degree until we've fixed those problems first. I think it's going to be a really big problem if we put all of our financial information onto a blockchain where it's transparent, and we haven't addressed that we have these authoritarians in power, we're pretty much just giving them the tools to oppress us. Like, this is something where we have to deal with that first.
Good point.
I don't.
Bose.
I don't know whether it would ever be a good idea to put all of your financial assets out on the blockchain. The blockchain is a public space, and what you're saying is, you know, let's not put all our store of value, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, stores of value out on the chain. That's not really you don't want to do that. You just want to use it as a transport layer. You're saying that this thing here belongs to this person here at this time, and then I'm transferring it over, this thing, to this other person here at this time for this much cost, and I'm keeping a track of it. And
yeah, I think in an ideal world that would be nice, but we don't live in that ideal world. So yeah,
no, I'm just saying that Bitcoin is the transport layer, and that it's just a record, and the blockchain is just a record of the transactions that have happened.
Right.
What data you
hold on,
you know, what data is in those transactions is kind of besides the point. I mean, you know, it could be a knowledge exchange, or it could be a physical exchange, or, you know, an economic exchange of some kind. But anyway, or a securities exchange. But anyway, like the point is that, like, it's here, and that we can build all sorts of value exchange protocols and stuff on Bitcoin in public, let's say, and Craig Wright has kind of, you know, guaranteed us essentially that the protocol won't change under our feet. so that we'll be able to do that on Bitcoin. So that's very good. In terms of authoritarian governments like hunting you down and like persecuting you for your use of psychedelic drugs or whatever, well, that's a problem. That's a bigger problem in the world writ large that none of us individually has any particular control over. Something like cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug on the UN Charter, I think, and it shouldn't be, right? It probably shouldn't be at all. It's not dangerous, and it's only there because it was competing with cotton. So like, I think we ought to get rid of that globally, and the UN should definitely address that. And that's something that we can change, and we can change drug laws bit by bit. But we're not, you're not going to go into the Congo, for example, and change their government's idea about cocaine, for example. I mean, that's not something that you're going to waste your time doing. So look at do the easy work first, do the low-hanging fruit. Cannabis shouldn't be a Schedule 1 drug on the UN Charter, and it should be, universally unbanned, essentially. And there are reasons for it, and then, like I say, they're mostly capitalist economic reasons that compete with cotton. But anyway.
All right. So just notice I got a 15-minute countdown here till I've got to end the space. And so why don't we go around and do like a everybody, all the speakers and do 2 more minutes, and we can at least 2 minutes and open up to anything else at the end. So Casey, you're the first up to my left, my right. So take 2 minutes, whatever time you like, if you have any, or wave time. Casey. All right. We'll come back to you if you're ready. Mila. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, yeah, definitely that's a whole other topic, right? To realize that, sure, the things that we should be putting on the ledger and on the blockchain, it should be, all what is already official matters, and that our private lives should be getting more and more offline, really. It shouldn't be that which is sort of like people say spying on us, for example, that should start running over blockchain or something, and whatever we do in our private lives, if it's drugs or whatever it is, of course, these things are private matters. They shouldn't be on blockchain, and for sure, we're also going to have, everybody I have tried to talk to about, BSB, blah, blah. I give up, everybody's terrified of digital money and the control. And so even that, we're going to, of course, also, as the human creativity always does, it finds something that it's going to have as handheld physical means of exchange as well. So I feel like these things are not to forget in order also not to have that fear, right?
Nice. Thank you, Mila. Okay, Cam, you're up next, buddy. 2 minutes. In closing.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, again, I guess I just like to reiterate, like, it'd be great to think about the human impact of the technology. And I just wanted to say that I came across this concept of pronoia, which is the opposite of paranoia, where you basically, instead of saying, oh, like the governments are going to take over the world and oppress us, the ultimate conspiracy would have to be a surprise party. And so if you go into since we're co-creating this reality from our shared narrative, if we convince ourselves that we are ultimately leading to the reveal of some kind of like surprise party, and that's what the conspiracy is, we will go down that reality tunnel. And so I think that the powers that be, what they're going to learn is that, like, we're going through a process that is beyond the control of everyone. And so any kind of control freak mentality of trying to control others and oppress others, those people will get thrown against the wall. I posted like a Terence McKenna quote about that. And they will quickly learn that that's not what's going to happen, because ultimately no one's in control of this. And so a lot of what this process
Kevin
is
Trudeau's of the
about.
world, basically, you know, or whatever Trudeau's name is up there in Canada. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, yeah. I was going to say something, but
Sorry, I hope I didn't get you off point. Continue.
No, it's all good.
Those
It's all good.
controllers, and I'm just thinking of him in my image as the perfect guy that
Yeah.
blesses everybody.
Yeah. I call him Mr. Dress Up because he likes to dress up as different kinds of people. But yeah, basically, what I'm trying to say is this process is about decontrolling. It's about letting go control. It's about surrendering to something bigger than yourself. And so I think the more that we learn that, and the more the world realizes that, the better off we're going to be. And we can just have faith and belief that this is ultimately going to result, like all aliens, the singularity, BSV, all of this stuff is ultimately like coming towards some kind of climax or reveal. And I like to think that that's going to be some kind of surprise party for humanity, like us cracking out of the cosmic egg.
Nice. Okay, we got 4 speakers left and 10 minutes to go. So Bose, you're up. 2 minutes.
I'm happy to speak. I don't actually have my hand up, so I'm happy to
I'm just
listen
going
as well.
around
I'd
and
like to chime
closing
in.
and seeing if you have anything to add here. So you can wave.
I mean, I'd like to. I do have something. Can you come back to me again? I'm going to try and write them down.
Let's go on over to Brett Banify.
Hey everyone. So in closing, want to thank everyone, want to hopefully encourage everyone to continue to do these spaces. Let's come back and continue these conversations because there's a lot of meat on this bone. And we are sometimes talking in metaphors and things like that. BSV blockchain is a truth ledger. We're also talking about the truth ledger of the Akashic Records, and the idea of, maybe Einstein said that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? That every action has an equal and opposite reaction. These are basically they're all metaphors for the same thing, that we're just the universe in a process of trying to discover itself, but no single vantage point within the universe gives you a full perspective of the entirety of the universe, right? So we have to individuate as pieces of this universe, and then move around trying to remember our heritage, our astral memories, our ancestral memories, as Cam was saying. And what is the process for that? It's an age-old process. It's been documented a lot of times in terms of how to recover and reconnect with that more primal base nature to yourself. And we're all on that journey. So this is a perfect place to be. It's a perfect place to explore this. I'll just make a quick shout to morphogenetics, which is a term brought to my attention by Rupert Sheldrake. I do a lot of inquiry in what's called the integral or the AQAL community, AQAL, which stands for all quadrants, all levels, based around the writings of Ken Wilber. And Rupert Sheldrake is someone that has a lot of really great input and content. Morphogenesis is essentially the concept that once patterns present themselves in the universe, they're just easier to present them again. So a classic example is you teach a certain species of rat to perform this trick in one part of the planet, and then on the other part of the planet, those same rats can perform that trick easier. Or once you crystallize a certain substrate or a certain crystal structure, it becomes easier to crystallize again. So these are, again, metaphors back to that, the ancestral memory, our body as tuning forks, our body as our DNA as antennas, things that we all talked about. And then, what is the great discovery? What are we trying to recover? Well, we're just trying to recover the memories of basically ourselves. And what's really interesting about this is, like we talked
Okay,
about,
Brett.
Trudeau, the great,
Well,
we can.
Don't mean to interrupt. I've
What's
got
it?
I'm getting up close on time, and I want to have everybody else speak. So can I hold off on?
Yes.
I'm sorry. You're really getting
That's
on to
okay.
it, and I've got a time limit here. So Matt, Crypto Spartacus, and then Bose, and then BSV Panama, and then we'll close. So Matt, 2 minutes, buddy.
2 minutes. Yeah, I got booted off because I had a call, so I missed a lot of this, unfortunately. So I don't know. I'd almost rather take a question, or if someone has anything directly related to Age of Aquarius or BSV and what's going on in terms of price action and when is the Band-Aid going to be ripped off on this whole thing, I can shed some light on that.
When is there's a go. When is what did you call it? The bounty or the blanket? When's it? Yeah, the Band-Aid. When's it going to be ripped off? There you go.
Yeah, because everything now is like a Band-Aid. It's not even a solution. It's like this whole system it's supposed to die. Even the people who are running it and running for office now and in on all this, they know that. So yeah, I think we just got to keep building and have our own vision and the vision of the creator. Could try to find the balance between as co-creators. Because it's all coming together. I'm just trusting the process. All
right. Well, let's go on over to Crypto Spartacus then. 2 minutes, my man. And you were responding to Bose or anything else you want to add? Love to hear from you. And thank you for all you've added.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do this space just because I feel like it's something I'm more passionate about even than crypto, is that we're all kind of being controlled and manipulated by these authoritarian psychopaths who have taken over central banking and global finance. But the way that they've achieved that is by taking control over our minds. Like, we've only been able to go along with this for so long because they've kept not just drugs, but information away from us that is empowering to us. So they've disempowered the masses to give themselves leverage over the rest of us. And yeah, I really agree with what Matt is saying. This is all coming to an end. Like, this has only worked for so long because people have had the wool pulled over their eyes. Now that the veil is being removed and we're seeing how all of these different mechanisms to control us have been used over the last several hundred years at least, I mean, you're only going to allow people to take advantage of you like that when you don't know that it's happening. As soon as you become aware of it, you want that to stop. And once there's a mass awareness that this is what's happening, it's going to have to stop. So really, I just want to accelerate that process because I really want to put an end to this. I want to live in a world where I don't have to worry about what my kids are going to have to do in the future just to survive. Like, I want them to have the freedom to do what they want. I want them to have the freedom to explore their own minds and the world around them and to explore everything the way I have. So really, I think that's something that we need to prioritize even before we fix the financial mess that we're in.
Okay, I'm going to add to that at the end in closing here. But Bose, Bose, back to you, and then the last BSV Panama.
Well, okay, so the thing, BSV Panama, I'll try and make this as quick as I can. The one thing that I wanted to talk about earlier, the other thing I wanted to talk about was memes and memeplexes. And Richard Dawkins talks about this. There are genes and memes, right? And you can think about the whole of biology as like a war amongst the genes for who can be the best, most successful genes. And the ones that win are the ones that fit into their environment best. Survival of the fittest is actually the ones that fit. The ones that are, so if you think about it like a jigsaw puzzle, the bits of the pieces have to fit into each other in order for you to see the whole picture. And that's like the genome, the human genome, when you're putting together the jigsaw puzzle of the human genome. We all belong to the genome in different ways, and we've got to figure out how we fit into the bigger picture. So in terms of authoritarian psychopaths taking over the world and banking and stuff, the reality is that like there's always going to be a few dominant genes that rise to the top of the gene pool and then control everything, right? And that hierarchy always gets corrupted, and power accrues, and more power accrues to a smaller and smaller number of people. Now, there is an equivalent to genes with memes as well. And what we're seeing, my thesis at the moment, what I've been talking about a lot on Twitter, is that the memes are really in control. So you have memes and memeplexes, which are basically bodies of knowledge, and they're fighting it out for dominance. In the same way, in your brain, you have cultures of knowledge, and those cultures are fighting out for dominance. They're fighting essentially to create a unified worldview via which you can operate in the world and be and accumulate power. Okay, so in the same way, you have dominant gene pools accumulating power because they've got a superior view of the world, let's say, more unified, cohesive vision than everybody else. The memes are doing the same thing in the brain. Right, so you've got body, and you see the big memeplexes are things like Hebrew, for example. English is a very powerful memeplex at the moment. Spanish, Chinese, etc. And they're living organisms, right? That's the thing. They're living cultures. You can change definitions. You can, they move around, all sorts of things. They're growing. Okay. So anyway, when we're talking about information and data exchange, we're talking about memes doing trade, memeplexes doing trade with other memeplexes. English doing trade with Chinese, for example, and an English or the English economy doing trade with the Chinese economy, etc., etc. The history of religion and monotheism particularly is the search for the universal language, the lingua franca. And the universal language is the language that unites everybody into a single cohesive organism, right? At the highest economy, the lowest cost per transfer. So,
I want to thank all the
I
speakers.
could vibe on that for a long time, but sorry.
No,
okay.
I just want to thank all the speakers, everybody who tuned in today, and and really appreciate you guys coming up on a panel. We'll do another one in the future. We'll go to BSV Panama and closing on the way out, and before I end the space. So, but yeah, thank you everyone, and perhaps in the future we could talk on a space about the 14th Amendment and how the entire legal framework of the world has been intertwined by that, and what we can do about it one day. So, all right, BSV Panama, take us out, my man. Over to you. Hello. No. I was hoping to save you for the end. Can you unmute? He's not
Okay,
there.
so due to
All
the
right.
richness of this
All right.
conversation, I would offer to do an after space if people want to continue talking. So
Hello?
let
Can you
me
hear
know.
me?
Give
Hello?
signs.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking and it wasn't coming through,
Sabrina, I'll
right?
be right there. I've got to call it a day,
Is that
guys.
okay
I've got to end here, BSV Panama. So I'm really sorry for the last. I wanted to go out with you, but maybe you can give us 30 seconds and go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, no, the idea is that, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I had 4 points. Blockchain is a tool, so it's subject to people's choices. All information records cannot be on that tool because of physical constraints. 3, believing to be or to have achieved, to be in or to have achieved a certain state does not mean to be in that state. And 4th, thank you for the space and to all the participants.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end it there. I'll see everyone. I'll see you at the top.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. That was intense. Sabrina.
Hey there.
I'm going to go ahead and jump onto my my Bluetooth and connect because I've been at the computer for too long and I need to go out and for a walk, and I can talk with you on the mobile.
Okay, cool.
Just a moment. All right. Okay. 1 moment. Patience. Oh. Oh wait, let me end.